Hello and welcome to the Investigative Lens. I'm Ava, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here. This is the podcast where we take a deep dive into some of the most intriguing, complex, and often controversial cases that challenge our perspectives and demand closer scrutiny. If you're someone who loves unraveling mysteries, exploring untold truths, and questioning the narratives we've been given, you've come to the right place. Together, we'll examine these cases through a critical lens, connecting the dots and shedding light on the unanswered questions. Every episode, I'll bring you compelling stories, expert insights, and thought-provoking discussions that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Whether it's unsolved crimes, historical enigmas, or modern-day controversies, nothing is off the table here. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's investigation. This is the Investigative Lens, where the story always goes deeper. Have you ever wondered what happens to those who speak truth to power, especially when it involves exposing potential wrongdoings in the legal system? It's a question that haunts us, right? Makes you wonder who's really protecting us. Today, we're going to dive into a case that will send chills down your spine, the unsettling story of Dawn Pasela. Dawn was a young woman full of life. She found herself at the heart of a story that seems like it's straight out of a crime thriller. She started as an office manager for a mortgage fraud task force in Cleveland, Ohio, just doing her job. But her commitment to what was right led her down a path that ultimately cost her life. Just as she was about to testify about some serious misconduct within that task force, she was found dead in her apartment under incredibly suspicious circumstances. We're going to examine the evidence surrounding her death and explore the questions that continue to haunt her family and friends and those fighting for justice in her name. To understand this case, we really need to go back to the beginning, to who Dawn was. She was a remarkable individual. Graduated top of her class not once but twice from both Cleveland State University and Cuyahoga County Community College. Bright and driven, this is what led her to be hired by the Mortgage Fraud Task Force. She was specifically hired by prosecutors Dan Casares and Mark Bennett. Initially, she was very enthusiastic about her role, ready to make a difference. But as time went on, she became increasingly troubled by the tactics that Casares and Bennett were employing. And this brings us to a pivotal case, the case of Anthony Viola. Tony Viola was a real estate broker, and he was indicted for mortgage fraud. This was a case that Casares and Bennett were leading. The charges were serious, really serious. Viola was accused of stealing $46 million. They called it the nation's largest mortgage fraud case. However, Viola maintained his innocence through the entire ordeal. As the case progressed, it became more and more clear that their case was weak and might fall apart. So, Casares and Bennett directed Dawn to go undercover. They had her pose as a grad student. She was supposed to be studying criminal justice, and she was tasked with infiltrating Viola's defense team. She offered to help, like as a paralegal, and she started recording conversations with Viola after he was indicted. This was all so the prosecution could gain insight into his defense strategy. It gets even crazier. They even had Dawn contribute funds to Viola's legal fees. This was so they could trace the law firm's bank account through her cancelled checks. This whole undercover operation weighed heavily on Dawn's conscience. She started to realize that the prosecution's tactics were not just ethically questionable, they were potentially illegal. They were actually withholding evidence that could have helped prove Viola's innocence. This is called exculpatory evidence. Ultimately, Dawn made a courageous decision to provide Viola with this withheld evidence. And it was this move that ultimately led to his exoneration. But in a second trial, mind you, Dawn was prepared to testify about the misconduct she had witnessed. Tragically, her life was cut short before she could, and the circumstances surrounding her death are just riddled with these unsettling details. It's almost as if there were too many coincidences, too many things that just don't add up. First of all, investigators found 3 cell phones in her apartment. 3 cell phones, which is weird, one of which had an outgoing call logged well after her supposed time of death. Now that obviously raised red flags. Why would a deceased person's phone be making calls? Plus, there's the fact that the heat in her apartment was cranked up to an unusually high temperature. It was like an oven. It seemed to be intended to accelerate the decomposition of her body. Even more suspicious is the fact that Dawn's computer vanished. This computer contained potentially incriminating evidence from numerous criminal cases that the task force had handled. So it wasn't simply misplaced, it was gone. Then, to add to the mystery, a window in her apartment was left open, despite this excessive heat. Was it an escape route? It's possible. So we've got cell phones, the heat, the missing computer, and an open window. What else? Well, the toxicology reports revealed a blood alcohol content close to 0.60, which is incredibly high, a level that many experts find inconsistent with the police photographs taken at the scene. So, is this an attempt to stage Dawn's death, make it look like an accident? It's possible if they were trying to portray it as a simple alcohol-related accident, but the evidence just doesn't add up. It really makes you wonder if someone was trying to cover their tracks. As we delve deeper into the case, we find even more evidence suggesting foul play. Dan Casares, one of the prosecutors leading the task force, and the one who directed Dawn to go undercover, was found to be having an affair with a key government witness, Catherine Clover. She testified in numerous cases for the prosecution, so there's a clear conflict of interest there. It casts a shadow over everything Casares was involved in. Was he using his position to protect this witness? Were cases manipulated? It's impossible to ignore this connection. And what about the other prosecutor, Mark Bennett? Well, he was later fired by the Justice Department and disbarred for making false statements about the evidence in Viola's case. This not only corroborates Dawn's concerns about prosecutorial misconduct, but it also places Bennett right there, within the circle of those who had a motive to silence her. So we have two prosecutors, both with potential motives. Still, the plot thickens when we consider the testimony of Donald Cleland, the chairman of the task force. He confirmed that Dawn had access to hard drives containing evidence from hundreds of state and federal criminal cases. So it wasn't just about the Viola case. It means that a wide range of individuals could have had a reason to harm Dawn to prevent this incriminating information from coming to light. Makes you wonder if this was just the tip of the iceberg. If that wasn't enough, the Palmer Police Department's handling of the investigation into Dawn's death adds another layer of suspicion. Records show they didn't follow standard procedures. They made some really strange decisions, like calling a mortuary service instead of an ambulance to Dawn's apartment. They also failed to collect crucial evidence, including those cell phones we talked about earlier. They did not thoroughly canvass the area around her apartment for witnesses or obtain surveillance footage. They didn't even coordinate their investigation with the medical examiner's office. It's like they were intentionally botching the investigation. You would expect basic procedures to be followed, securing the scene, collecting potential evidence, but none of that happened here. And there's more. A subsequent review of the case by the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office confirmed that the Palmer police had violated numerous procedures during their investigation. So it wasn't just a few oversights, it was a pattern of misconduct. Then, in 2023, there were further developments that added even more weight to the theory that Dawn's death was no accident. Jason Samide, a friend of Dawn's, came forward and revealed that Dawn had contacted him shortly before her death asking for his help. So she was afraid of something or someone, which indicates she may have been feeling threatened or in danger. We don't know why she reached out to him specifically, and we don't have all the details of their conversation, but it's clear she felt she couldn't go to the police. And what about Marty Mora, the man who may have been the last to see her alive? He has refused to cooperate with any investigations, adding another layer to this already complex and disturbing case. It's like everyone has something to hide. Despite all this mounting evidence and the sheriff's directives to reopen the case and refer it to an outside agency, the Palmer Police Department has remained resistant. Their reluctance just fuels the suspicion that there's something they're desperate to keep hidden. What makes it even more heartbreaking is that Dawn's family, along with their attorney and organizations like freetonyviola.com and uncovered.com, have been tirelessly advocating for a proper investigation into her death. They believe that the truth has been deliberately obscured and those responsible for Dawn's death must be held accountable. This deep dive into Dawn's mysterious death has uncovered a web of intrigue, potential corruption, and a deeply unsettling lack of transparency from the authorities. It's like something out of a movie, but sadly, this is real life. And the question remains, was Dawn's death a tragic accident? Or was she silenced to protect the secrets of those in power? It's chilling when you think about it. Dawn, alone in her apartment, knowing what she knew, about to expose it all. It makes you wonder who else knew what she knew. We have to remember the task force chairman, Donald Cleland. He concerned that Dawn had access to evidence from hundreds of cases, state and federal. We're talking a lot of potential dirt and a lot of powerful people. Suddenly, the idea that someone wanted her silenced is not so far-fetched. Then we have the part about the police department and how they mishandled the investigation. A lot of missteps, and they violated procedure after procedure. This fight for justice for Dawn is far from over. Her family and their attorney, Kimberly Corral, Tony Viola, and her many supporters are not giving up. They're demanding answers and pushing for transparency. Most importantly, they are keeping Dawn's story alive. They believe that the truth will come out and those responsible will be held accountable. It's inspiring to see them, their resilience, their dedication to getting to the bottom of what happened to Dawn. Dawn's case is a wake-up call. It forces us to confront those uncomfortable truths about power, corruption, and the lengths some people will go to keep their secrets. It's a challenge to all of us to be more vigilant, to question authority, and to demand accountability from those who are supposed to be upholding justice. And it begs the question, what can we do to prevent future tragedies like Dawn's? How do we protect those who speak truth to power? Let's explore those questions as we wrap up our deep dive into this unsolved case. So we've uncovered a lot, haven't we? A young woman, dead under suspicious circumstances, evidence that disappears, a police investigation that seems deliberately flawed, and those at the center of it all, with potential motives to keep things quiet. Where do we go from here? What can we do to make sure that what happened to Dawn doesn't happen again? It's a big question. It's about changing a system, right? It's about awareness, first and foremost. We need to shine a light on these cases, talk about them, share the information. The more people know about Dawn's case, about the corruption she was about to expose, the more pressure there is on those in power to do something. It's about holding them accountable. It's about supporting the organizations that are out there fighting for transparency and accountability. They're doing the hard work, investigating, advocating, demanding justice. We need to support them. Donate if you can. Share their content. Tell people about them. Give them a platform. And don't underestimate the power of your own voice either. Contact your elected officials. Demand the answers. Insist on a thorough investigation. Go to those city council meetings. Write letters to the editor. Speak up on social media. The more noise we make, the harder it is for those in power to ignore us. Silence is complicity. We have to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Remember, this isn't just about one woman, one case. This is about a system that is supposed to be there to protect us all. A system that's supposed to uphold justice. And clearly, it needs to change. This whole deep dive into Dawn's case has been unsettling, to say the least. But it's also been a reminder that we can't be complacent. We can't just sit back and hope things will get better. We have to be active, we have to be engaged, and we have to demand change. Dawn Pasela's legacy deserves to be one of truth, and she deserves justice. Thanks for joining me. Hope you join us again for another Investigative Lens episode.